I mean, and the nose job, of course, is to make you look like you have a white person's nose, and then the bleach for the blonde hair, because there's serious self-hate involved in this idea that Iran is somehow a little America. Gugush, which is like the most popular singer at the time, or one of the most popular singers, her album has her standing like this, and she's got pistols in her hands and a cowboy hat. She's wearing cowboy boots, right? She's Iranian. So it's sort of this weird, like, whoa, what's going on here? In late 1978, the Shah, the tyrant that we've installed, is sick. He has cancer. He leaves the country to go get medical treatment. In January of '79, there's a full-fledged revolution against him. He can't go back now because he's done. He's finished. The question is how this revolution is going to end. And interestingly enough, we had something up our sleeve, a person actually up our sleeve in Iraq, and his name is the Ayatollah Khomeini. So the two forces in Iran that did the revolution to overthrow the government that was pro-US, the two forces are the communists on one side and then the Islamists on the other side. So the US is facing a serious foreign policy catastrophe. Iran was such a good US ally that only 3 states on Earth ever owned the F-14. At the time, like probably the best fighter bomber in the air. The F-14 was an amazing aircraft. It was the United States, Great Britain, and Iran. Not even Israel had F-14s. Iran did. And so here's this country that we've invested so much into, that we've even to the point where we're giving them our best equipment, now having an anti-US revolution. And in part, it's a rejection of the cultural swing that got Iran the nickname Little America. They're like, why do we want to be Americans? We're Iranians. We have a civilization at that point. Iranians had a civilization that was, like 2,500, 2,600 years old, and they're imitating a civilization that's 200 years old. And there's a little bit of not only self-hate in it, it'd be like a parent imitating a 5-year-old child. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And so there's a little bit of reaction that way, but then there's also just, and then you gave us a quarter century of tyranny and you overthrew our democracy. We're done with the United States. We want to go our own way. So the question for the United States is, we've just lost one of our best allies. Certainly our best ally in the Middle East. What do we do to recover? If Iran goes communist, now Iran will be in the Soviet sphere of influence. If Iran goes Islamist, Iran will hate the Soviets because their avowed religion is atheism. So they won't go to the Soviets, and they won't go, we'll lose them, but the Soviets won't gain them. And so what we did was we told Saddam Hussein, you have custody of Ayatollah Khomeini, let him go, release him. Let him go into Iran. He had been in France, and then he had left for France to Iraq to be closer because he wants to foment this Islamist revolution. We actually help him get from Iraq into Iran. He gets into Iran, and sure enough, the Islamists win the revolution. And even though the communists had worked with the Islamists to have the revolution, as soon as the pieces fall into place, the Islamists execute the communists. So now the communists are out of the picture, and the Islamists take over, and they create the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the Ayatollah Khomeini takes over. The United States decides, we're not done. We're not done. But before we get to what the United States does in an act of vengeance, let me just talk about the Iran hostage crisis. So the revolution happens. The U.S. Embassy is mostly shut down. We have a skeleton staff. And what ends up happening is a group of college students, kids your age, get together and march on the U.S. Embassy. Well, as they're marching towards the embassy, the Iranian government calls up the U.S. Embassy and says, get out. And the reason they want them to get out is because an embassy is sovereign territory of the state that is represented at the embassy. And those students, the Iranian government knows, those students have the intention of capturing the U.S. Embassy. Technically, those students will be in the act of invading U.S. territory at that moment. They will be defying U.S. sovereignty, which means that at that moment they will create an international incident. And the new revolutionary government doesn't want to have to deal with an international incident. This is just bad. There's no one's going to win this. So they tell the U.S. Embassy staff to get out, what's left of it. And a few people do, but about 50 people don't. They ignore the warning. And the reason is because they're desperately shredding the documents that they have in the embassy. Because the documents do stuff like chronicle the U.S. overthrow of the Iranian government in 1953 and everything the United States did that was nasty in Iran afterwards. And so that's why the students are going to the embassy. They want those documents because the United States has always denied, up until recently in fact, that the U.S. had anything to do with the overthrow of the Iranian democracy in 1953. So the students want to capture those documents to prove that the United States did this. They climb over the wall, and sure enough, they find shredded documents everywhere, and they find those 50 CIA operatives, right? This isn't embassy staff. These are the CIA hacks who have been left to get rid of the evidence. And they're like, oh. And the students capture them. And then they take those shredded documents. They have a bunch that they didn't even get here that's not shredded, but they want the shredded stuff because that's probably the best, right? They probably prioritized it. They take the shredded stuff and they put them in bags, and they walk over to nearby schools and they go, kids, you like puzzles? And they dump them out on the floor and they go, put these together. And they do. So we have all of those documents. The CIA effectively, they should have lit them on fire or something. They screwed this up. They didn't quite actually get rid of them. Now here's what's really amazing. And it shows you how much faith we had in the idea that Iran was permanently a U.S. ally. It turned out that the Tehran embassy wasn't just our headquarters for all CIA operations in Iran. It was headquarters for all CIA operations in Asia. So when those kids got a hold of all of those documents, they didn't just have proof, categorical proof that the U.S. overthrew their government in '53. They also had the names of all the active CIA agents in all of Asia. And the kids went to the nearby Xerox machine and began copying everything. And they basically said, anybody wants this info? Here it is. The whole world, you can have it. As punishment for our overthrow of their government in '53. So in an instant, the CIA experiences one of the worst catastrophes that it's ever endured because it has to pull all its active agents out of Asia because they'll be killed otherwise, because their name, their location, what they're doing, all of that is now known to whomever. So basically the CIA gets wiped out in Asia, gets wiped out and has to start over. The students then say, okay, here's the proof. 1953. We even know his name, Kermit Roosevelt. Your documents. We want the United States to apologize. And of course, the United States categorically will never apologize. We will never take responsibility for anything we do. And so no, it's not going to happen. Students go, okay, we'll just keep these 50 CIA hacks as hostages until you do. At which point the Iranian government's like, because they had hoped that students would capture the documents and then release the 50 CIA hacks, and then, the incident can be over. It's bad, it's a disaster for them, but now the students just hunker down. They're like, no, you're never going to see these 50 guys again until you apologize. And of course, Jimmy Carter, president at the time, is never going to apologize. So this is a problem. Months go by, and in that time period that the months that are going by is happening, the Iranian government is desperately negotiating with the students to get them to release the hostages so that they can get past this crazy incident. And finally, in 1980, or early